Hello, and welcome to a new programme brought to you by EWTN Great Britain. I'm Joanna Bogle. In this first programme, we'll be exploring various issues and getting insights into some of the timeless aspects of our faith, as well as keeping you up to date with some of the current trends and events in the Church. We start with Brenden Thompson, Coordinator of Catholic Voices, speaking with James McCullough of EWTN GB on Blessed John Henry Newman's progress towards canonisation.
Hello, I'm James McCullough. I'm speaking to you from the Rosary Shrine in London today. And with me is my guest, Brenden Thompson, CEO of Catholic Voices. As Newman is now approaching canonisation, if Newman was to be seen as a patron saint of a cause, what would you say he could be the patron saint of?
I'm really excited for his canonisation, and God willing, not only will he be made the first English saint in about 50 years since the martyrs, the Reformation martyrs, but I also, God willing, hope he'll be made a doctor of the Church. Certainly, if any Englishman deserves that title of recent memory, it's certainly Newman. I think Newman he could be the patron saint of loads of things. Be the patron saint of dialogue with secularism. Of understanding faith and reason, of Anglican converts. Right. But I'd make an argument for saying he could be seen as the patron saint of the new evangelization.
Okay.
And this is a term that's kind of thrown around a lot. So by new evangelization, I mean the re-evangelization of the baptized. Conscious that we live, as John Paul II talked about, in a new situation. It's not a new message, but a new situation in which many of the faithful don't understand the basic teachings of Christianity. So it's kind of re-proposing or re-evangelizing people who think they already know who Jesus is and have denied it. And I think Newman helps us in that space because this is exactly what he encountered in the 19th century. When he was made a cardinal, he said the chief fight of his life was fighting liberalism in religion. This kind of spirit, or treating religion as if it's kind of just subjective truth. Right. It's nice, it's sentimental feeling, but nothing more than that, And Newman fought that with kind of every bone in his body.
Like a cultural faith, in a sense.
Like a cultural faith. And I mean, for Anglicans at the time, there was a movement called latitudinarianism. Latitude, to have a lot of latitude, means that, you don't really need to believe in God to be a Christian. Or that's nice. It's personal. Religion should be privatized. And Newman prophesies that liberalism, unchecked, could become full-blown secularization. So Newman has been seen by many as prophetic of the liberalism of Newman's age has become the full-blown secularism of our own age.
Yes, I see, absolutely.
And I think there's an even more providential link that links Newman to being the saint, or could be regarded as the patron saint of the new evangelization. The Pontifical Commission that was set up by Pope Benedict in 2010 for the new evangelization, an individual department was set up just before the papal visit, right, and launched almost a day or two afterwards, after the papal visit. So Pope Benedict, when talking to the English bishops in Oscott, in Birmingham, said to them to avail themselves of this brand new department, the Department of the New Evangelization. So I think even in Benedict's mind, and you can see from the speeches, when you read back the various speeches and addresses from the papal visit, you see this intimate link between Newman and the New Evangelization, kind of a crossover, but a particularly English style of the New Evangelization. There's an Aristotelian principle, what's received is received by the mode of the recipient. We see things according to our lens, I think there's often a temptation sometimes to go to other cultures and think this is a really good, amazing, like American resource, and sometimes you felt like it doesn't quite fit into the English context.
Right.
It wasn't Americans in the 19th century, but it was Italians, very, very influenced. And Newman, there were other oratorians, quite famously Faber, who quite liked what you might regard now as quite over-the-top sentimentality. And even Newman at his time says, this isn't cricket, this isn't very kind of English. And so I think he will we'll see towards his canonization, actually, I think what a spirit of an English type of, or he'll help us to discern the features of an English brand of a new evangelization, one that speaks particularly to this culture.
Yes, something that we need quite badly in this country, really.
Yeah, because there's nothing wrong with other cultures, but you need something that speaks particularly to the heart, to the concerns, the heart speaks unto heart, that every culture differs in what its priorities are and how it needs to be spoken to.
Yes, indeed.
Let's now hear from Mary Rakowicz as she speaks with Fr Dominique Faure, a renowned worldwide speaker from the Verbum Spei Community, on the subject of joy, hope, and the contemplative life.
Hello, I'm Mary Rakowicz, here in Walsingham with Fr Dominique. Father, what is it that people are most needing or wanting to hear?
You know how the Holy Father John Paul II was speaking of a terrible temptation of despair, even a culture of despair, which implies sadness. And I think that what the Church is the most called to give today is a face of joy and a message of hope. And clearly those cultures which are the least offering a message of joy and hope are the most advanced cultures. When you go to Africa, when you go to India, you still find a sense of community, you still find a religious desire, but in many modern cultures, many countries which are more advanced, there's an emptiness. And the Church is there to show us that there's a meaning for life. There's a joy not only for the future, but a joy offered to us now. And I think that the Holy Father Pope Francis insists a lot on this dimension of the responsibility of the Church and of the apostolic life today.
What is hope, Father? What is it to live deeply of hope?
Yeah, there's obviously hope at a shallow level, which is basically a passion and emotion, where we hope to obtain whatever good we desire. Which is usually sensitive. There's a religious hope which is present in all religions, where if we live properly according to certain laws, religious laws, then we expect to obtain a reward in the future. So this type of hope is always linked to the future, including the hope of Israel, which was still imperfect compared with the Christian hope, where the Jews were and are still waiting for a Messiah to come, the future. While our Christian hope, which implies also this dimension of waiting for the final manifestation of the glory of the victory of Christ, and therefore this glory offered to us, the Christian hope implies a dimension which is for today. And in fact, that's the good news offered by Christ. I came to bring tidings of joy today to the poor, not in the future. Jesus doesn't say the kingdom will come later. The kingdom is now among you, and that's even the first name of Christ, Emmanuel, God among us. So the Christian hope has this incredible dimension of inviting us, of enjoying the kingdom of God now, of enjoying the victory of Christ now, in spite of all our imperfections, because we have discovered how far God loves us, how far He's ready to offer His mercy, and that in fact there's nothing anymore, because of the sacrifice of Christ, which will ever separate us from this love and this presence of God for us. So it is now that we can live of this fullness that Christ has offered to us. We are still in the darkness of faith. Later, hopefully, we will see in the light of glory. But nevertheless, and the words that were so strong in Thérèse, the little flower, while she was in total darkness, heaven was like empty for her. And in the same time, she says, I don't expect to enjoy in heaven anything that I don't already enjoy here on earth, meaning she, in her hope, was living fully of the loving presence of Christ for her, even if she couldn't feel, she couldn't see, she couldn't experience. Nevertheless, hope was strong enough for her to enjoy this presence of Jesus.
Father, you're always linking hope and joy.
Yeah, imagine a life without hope, which would basically be a life of despair. I think it would be pretty gloomy. While when we have great desires, and even the greatest possible desires, then if we don't have a great hope, then obviously we would despair. While if we have a great hope, then those desires lived in hope are source of great joys also. And there's, in a certain way, nearly more joy before Christmas for a child waiting for his gift for the few weeks before, during the few weeks before, than when he opens his gifts, because it's over. So there's a real joy of waiting in hope. There's a real joy of desiring in hope.
In this next interview, I'm discussing the whole subject of commitment with a leader of a religious community whose charism is discernment of vocation. A major problem today is about commitment. We all seem to be able to change our minds all the time about anything. With our mobile phones, we can even change a dinner date or something like that in a way that we couldn't at one time, at the last minute almost. But then what about the bigger things? Commitment to lifetime marriage, commitment to religious life, commitment to a project that needs and deserves our help and to which we've given our word. Well, with me in the studio is Sister Camilla of the Community of Our Lady of Walsingham. And Sister, your particular calling in the community is to help people discern what they're meant to do with their lives and, well, get on with it.
That's right, Joanna. Yes, as a community, we try and help people live the spirituality of Walsingham in depth. It's Our Lady's fiat. So it's helping every person be able to accept, surrender to the love and to the will of God in their lives. And it's multifaceted, the whole journey, but it's a beautiful journey.
But it's not an easy thing to do now.
Yeah.
I mean, at one time, you might say you were going to be a nun and you'd just get on with it, whether you really felt it was your calling or not by about 6 months or a year in. What about now? I mean, people leave things, don't they?
Yes, it's much harder, and also we're seeing fewer people coming forward to try the religious life or even the priesthood or even marriage for that fact. At the same time, when they start out on the journey, there's a higher dropout rate. But I think there are various factors related to this. So it's not just about the person or about religious life. But generally, choice making is really hard because of the culture we're kind of living in. And it's basically the result of globalization, the increase in individualism, a certain self-referentiality that's come into society. And out of this, people haven't got the kind of objective norms or guidelines on which to establish life choices. So there's a lack of discipline, there's a lack of objective choice making based in reality. And you really need to have a formation for freedom in any vocational choice so that a person can come in freedom to that choice and it becomes really their choice. And this is where, in a way, we've been midwifing vocations to many different orders as well, because I think one of the difficulties in it's not only about culture or the young people themselves who are showing more emotional and psychological fragility because of the culture they're growing in, but it's also consecrated life itself and priesthood and maybe even marriage. Have we transmitted a model of these vocations in a way that shows the goodness, the truth and the beauty of them, or not?
I think we often haven't. And one of the difficulties too is that a great many people now are very wounded by the circumstances of their upbringing. To anyone who's had a happy childhood in a secure home, by the standards of modern life, our Christmases and birthdays and holidays were extremely modest, but we all thought we were having a wonderful time. And I had a very jolly, happy childhood. But a lot of people have a really wretched time with much material abundance. I mean, quite extraordinary, almost a glut of toys at Christmas. But they have to put up with mum's new boyfriend, a missing dad whom they loved but seems to have disappeared from their life, and they're still only 11. Where's the commitment in that? You can't learn commitment, you haven't lived it.
Exactly, and I think that, you know, the battle to destroy the family, for us to save it as a domestic church is one of the most important things that we have in the church today. So it's really important to sustain marriage. And that's why it's so beautiful here at Walsingham, where you get so many families moving here. And I do think that Walsingham is actually going to be a very important vocational centre, not just to help young people discern their calling and to make life choices, whether it's about jobs or relationships, not only vocational states, but also to support vocations in themselves. So priests coming here on retreat, then families moving in, and to build up families, build up vocations that have already been chosen as well.
And commitment. We're all members of one another in a sense. What one person does, another is affected by. So that lack of commitment, for example, in marriage, it's very difficult now to see it as a normal thing. Boy asks a girl out. At one time, there would have been, at least in theory and hovering in the culture, a feeling this was about life's choices, and there might be a marriage at the end of it. Even going out on a date had some kind of meaning, it had some kind of point. That doesn't exist now. It's as if marriage is a very optional extra way down the line, and it shouldn't even be a line. It should just be something floating.
Well, the fact that people will have loads of anxieties,
Well, that's true.
depression, fear and anger, which we're seeing a lot of. And only in the BBC today, there was an article talking about the increase in mental illness or mental health issues in young people, teenagers and young people, especially of anxiety and depression. So if people in this society are feeling more and more rootless, that is actually linked to being vocationless.
And that's something you're really interested in the community of Our Lady of Walsingham.
Yeah.
A lot of people have, in any case, I suppose this has always been a problem, slightly romantic idea about becoming a nun. And a lot of religious orders are very frightened, perhaps that's the wrong word, but they're worried about even dying out because they're not getting young people. So somebody turns up all romantic and they think, oh, blue robe, you know, and how lovely, and Our Lady, and I've always been interested, and, you know, ever since they saw a film about Lourdes as a little girl, something like that. And they say, I want to join. You know, no questions, I've decided. But then what would your reaction be? Do you say, just bring a toothbrush?
No, Joe, put the brakes on. Go slowly. Partly because there is this need for people to internalise certain values. You can make a choice, and I think one of the things that research from the Institute of Psychology in the Gregorian University has shown is that when people go into a vocational choice with a very ideal image of it, whether that's priesthood, marriage or consecrated life, the perseverance rate actually goes like this and then suddenly drops. So there's a large dropout. Whereas if people go into these vocations with more realistic understanding of what it entails, the perseverance rate is much longer.
Father Gerard Mary, a priest from a Franciscan community, just returned to Walsingham after almost 500 years, will be speaking to us on the Franciscan charism and the spirituality of Walsingham.
Hello, all peace and good. My name is Father Gerard Mary Tommen, and I'm a conventual Franciscan priest. Walsingham is a village in North Norfolk, on the east coast of England. It's surrounded by natural beauty and an abundance of wildlife. For a shrine dedicated to promoting the joy of Our Lady at the Annunciation, to be a place of peace, prayer and reconciliation, you couldn't really pick a more perfect spot. Our Lady knew what she was doing when she chose Walsingham all those hundreds of years ago. The charism that God entrusted to St. Francis was one centred on the incarnation, on the sacred humanity of Jesus. St. Francis came to understand through prayer, through the guidance of the Holy Spirit, that the choices that Jesus made were ones for simplicity, poverty, minority, humility. St. Francis fell in love with this way, this perfect way. For St. Francis, Jesus had left this way for us to walk to heaven, so that walking in the footprints of Jesus, in simplicity, poverty, minority and humility, we too may become fully who it is God has called us to be. Here in the shrine of Our Lady at Walsingham, we have a beautiful piece of art which really goes to the core of everything Walsingham is about. The Annunciation. The moment when God became flesh in the womb of the Virgin Mary, after her fiat, after her yes. Mary was the humble one. Mary was the simple one. Mary was the one less looked upon. The one in all humility who would give her entirety to God. We reflect now on the humility, the total gift of oneself Our Lady made to God, and the joy that giving gives us. Walsingham has as its foundation stone the joy of the Annunciation, the joy Mary felt at God taking flesh and dwelling among us, dwelling among His creation to lead them to salvation. And in so many ways, the story of Walsingham is weaved inextricably with this sacred moment. Our Lady wanted Christ's faithful to understand her joy, to understand what it was the incarnation of God meant for us. And so she appeared in a series of visions to Lady Rocheldis, saying, "Build a holy house, the holy house where the angel Gabriel came to me to announce the incarnation of God." And I think it is here that the Franciscan charism and the spirituality of Walsingham go hand in hand. Walsingham founded on the joy of the Annunciation. St. Francis presenting to the world the sacred humanity of Christ. If we hold Christ before us, true God and true man, if we do as Our Lady once did and give herself completely to God, we will experience the joy, the perfect joy, which can only become from living in God's holy will. May the Lord bless you and keep you, and may He give you too a share in the joy of Our Lady at the Annunciation. Amen.
We know that the Dominicans gave us the Rosary, but today we've got a Dominican priest from London's Rosary Shrine speaking to us on a different subject. In this next interview, Father Lawrence Liu will be speaking with Marie Saber, Communications Officer for the Diocese of Westminster, on the virtues of using social media.
I'm speaking to you from St Dominic's Priory in London, and I'm very honoured today to be joined by Marie Saber, who is the Communications Officer for the Diocese of Westminster. Welcome.
Thank you.
So we're going to talk about social media and sort of being virtuous online. Would you like to first tell us a bit about your work and what you do for the diocese?
The work of communications for the diocese actually encompasses a wide variety of activities. It includes both internal communications, that is communicating with parishes, with internal colleagues, with schools, as well as outward facing, so with the media and with the faithful in general out there. And increasingly, that's no longer just the faithful in the diocese, but because of the age of the internet, the digital world, it's the whole world basically.
Okay. So there'll be Twitter, I suppose.
Twitter, Facebook, Instagram.
Instagram as well.
But then again, also if you think that there are other types of social media that we use, such as LinkedIn, we're dabbling a little bit in that because we need to let people know what we are doing on various fronts. But then there are other things such as Flickr. where we share images, as you do as well,
Yes.
as well as other platforms like Vimeo and YouTube. It seems like an endless stream sometimes, but the main three ones I would say.
That's quite a lot of work to coordinate.
It is indeed, and sometimes it appears as though it's invisible, or people think that, oh, well, that'll just take you a couple of moments to do. It's no big deal.
Yes.
And they don't realize exactly how much effort and time goes into developing those messages.
Is there a team of you working on all this then?
There are 3 of us who work on this, generally speaking, as well as there are other people who contribute as well to the process, because in addition to the diocesan accounts that we manage, we also help the vocations team with theirs, and we help the Cardinal with his social media
Yes, His
as well.
Eminence has a Twitter account, hasn't he?
He does, and he has an Instagram account as well.
Oh, has he?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I must discover all this.
Yes.
You know, the thing about the internet, I find, and especially on Twitter, is yes, we want to show the joy of the gospel, we want to be positive, but don't you think that people might regard this as a bit of spin, or even covering up, wallpapering over the cracks? Because, you know, the internet seems to thrive on controversy, and Twitter particularly seems to like to highlight the, how should we say, you know, difficult moments in the church, or whatever it might be. What's your response to that? Are you ever accused of just sort of, you know, siding with the status quo and sort of wallpapering over things?
Oh yes, that is some of the response that we get to these positive messages on particular days, for example. However, that's a very small minority of people. For the large part, people do like it and do appreciate it, by the simple fact, and how do we know this? By the simple fact of the number of retweets, the number of likes, some who share the post, if it's on Facebook, share it widely, or regram on Instagram and so on. And also we do get messages of people coming back and saying, thank you, this is, they'll say something very positive about it, and some will say that they were touched by it, or that on this particular day, this came at the right moment for them. So there are a lot of positives that outweigh the negatives. And as for some of the difficult moments in the church, as you rightly say, we don't paper over those either.
I hope you've found our first programme both inspiring and informative. Extended versions of these interviews are available on the EWTN GB website. Visit ewtn.co.uk. And please remember, we do value and need your help.